What I'm not going to talk about today is a lot of granular, specific stuff that we do with data. I've done talks like that. If you want to talk about, examples of what other organizations have done to use data to drive revenue, to use data to influence experience at events or through their membership, I'm always happy to do that. Just give me a call and we can talk. But I want to talk about some different stuff today. We're going to open up with decision making. We're going to move on to context. And then we're going to finish with that G word that someone mentioned earlier, governance. I think what we're finding is that a lot of organizations now realize two things. One is that they have an incredible amount of data, especially associations. We have data about who registers with us, what events they go to, what webinars they take, what certifications they have, how long they've been with the organization, their job title, their job history, what kind of publications they've purchased, all of this data. And we can use it, but it's not easy. So now that we have all the data, we're starting to realize also, looking at the private sector, which is usually a couple years ahead of us, they're really getting value out of this data. And I think we're realizing that we're not. And there's a couple things that stand in our way. The first is technical issues, and we're starting to overcome those. And the second are what we're going to talk about today. So when we say big data's impact on your organization, I'm not going to tell you that you're going to make more money using data. You already know that. What I am going to do is start talking about how that's happening and why that's happening. And the stuff that we're going to start with isn't even stuff about associations. It's stuff about consumers. Now, people earlier mentioned Amazon and what I call the Amazoning of expectations. And yes, if you mention, well, why can't we do it? Amazon does it to your CIO. You're probably going to get the side eye unless you get a fist in the face. So be real careful with that. I'll point out from another talk that I do, the largest nonprofit in this country, AARP, has an annual revenue of about $800 million. Amazon's R&D budget alone was $15 billion. So if you ask why can't we do it like Amazon does, that's why. They have more money than all of us put together, easily, just for R&D. What Amazon has done is changed expectation. And the tricky part of what we face right now is that Amazon's consumers are our consumers. So when they have that experience at Amazon, when they have that experience at Yelp and at Netflix and with all the other things they're using now, they expect our experience to be similar. And it probably won't be because we don't have those giant funds. So the question is, what are some of the elements of that experience and what do they really mean to decision making? Somebody earlier said, oh, I think she's gone. It was the doctor lady. We help, I'm sorry, I forgot her name. I apologize. I'm terrible with names. But she was super smart and she said, we help you use data to make better business decisions. And I wanted to pump my fist in the air because I say the same thing all the time. That's really what the data is about. It's about making better decisions. So this is from Forbes. Data should be at the heart of strategic decision making in business. And this is true. It should also be at the heart of strategic planning in business. So if you recently had a strategic planning process and you didn't pull a ton of data in to help you figure out what you've done, what you're doing, and where you're going, you probably missed an opportunity. If you have a strategic planning process coming up soon and you want to know what data you should bring, once again, give me or someone like me a call, and we're happy to talk a little bit about how that can help inform your process. Decision making is so interesting that there is now a degree called decision sciences. This is from Carnegie Mellon. There's also a unit of our parent business, Merit's Global Events, called people science. And it's a bunch of super big brain behavioral science PhDs. And all they do is figure out how and why people make decisions. And really, when you think about our jobs as association executives, we spend a lot of time making decisions. Now, some decisions are easy. We don't really need a ton of data for those. If I told you that I had a brand new 2018 Mercedes-Benz and I was going to sell it to you for $20 and there was nothing wrong with it, that's an easy decision, right? If I told you I wanted to sell you a 1982 Pinto and I wanted $1 million for it, that's also an easy decision. So we don't need a ton of data for that. We already know. Our job is to deal with all the stuff in between and figure out, is this a good decision for my business or is this a bad decision? Let me give you a personal example. I wear a CPAP at night. I have sleep apnea. And CPAP is made of a mask and a tube and a bunch of other stuff. and it's pumping air into my body to make sure I don't stop breathing. So that's important because air has germs and stuff in it. And I want to make sure the CPAP is clean. So I see an ad for this thing called the So Clean machine. And it's this big thing that sits on the thing. And instead of having to take it apart and clean it all, I can just take it and slap it in the machine and then pull it out and it's done. I was like, this is really great. If the machine was $20, it would already be sitting at my house. If the machine was $1,000, I would have laughed and said, no way. The machine was $330, right in that gray area where it's like, ooh, well, it's really useful, but that's kind of a lot. So what do? We go get data. I go do research. And I look, and I find there's actually no medical evidence that the So Clean does anything at all with respect to hygiene. So now it's easy again, right? $330 for a thing that's going to sit there of questionable value. It's not going to happen. Let's talk about other decisions that we make, but more importantly, that our members and our attendees make in their lives. These are the decisions and the ways they gather data that inform how we make better decisions as well. So if you're going to buy a car, what do? Big decision, you want to know Consumer Reports. Consumer Reports provides data on reliability. They provide data on how long the car is going to last. They give them ratings, all sorts of information. Now there's a service called TrueCar. Similar stuff. It tells you all about the car, tells you about the history. There's even other people that'll tell you about the car. We talked about reviews and ratings. You know, aggregating that information of us is kind of a hive mind. And we're able to take that data and then go and hopefully make a better decision with it. So before we buy a car, we're going to look at all that and make sure that we have as much information as we can get. What if we're buying a house? An even bigger decision. Everyone familiar with Zillow? Everyone's used Zillow? Of course you have. Even if you're not buying a house, it's really fun to go look at the map of your neighborhood and see how much all the houses are worth. Everyone's smiling. I know, I do it too. And I actually told my neighbor the other day how much her house was worth, and she just about fell down because she doesn't look at Zillow. But if you're going to buy a house, not only do you want to know what the price is, what else do you want to know? Well, if you've got kids, you want to know if they have good schools in the area. Great Schools is a really neat tool. It basically gives a 0 to 10 ranking for every elementary, middle, and high school in the country. So if you're really concerned about good schools, it's good to go to Great Schools. Now, when you go meta and you say, well, wait a second, how are they generating that ranking? You'll find that at the beginning, all they used were standardized test scores. Probably not the best ranking. Now they're also bringing in things like gaps in diversity. Are students of different backgrounds performing at the same level? Is anybody being left out? What other kinds of things are happening? And they're factoring that into their ranking. But in the end, when you're choosing to relocate, you want to gather data. What do you think this one's about? I'm sure nobody in this room has looked for a job in the last 5 years. Now, salary.com is of some value. It provides you with an estimate, but having looked on salary.com when I'm creating jobs to hire other people, the salary data is a little iffy, I think. Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's not. It depends on region, which they give you, but it also depends on a lot of other stuff. You can also go to Glassdoor. Anyone familiar with this one? Yeah. Now, Glassdoor is good for two things. One is looking at other companies, and one is looking at your own company. I worked at a company that had a Glassdoor rating of 2.3 out of 5. This was a serious problem. People were coming into interviews and saying to us, blah, 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 tell me about your culture. This is like marketing coordinator position. Tell me about your culture. I noticed on Glassdoor that you have a lot of negative reviews. You have a lot of employees who are unhappy about working here. That's making my decision about whether I want to join your organization more difficult. It's pushing it into that gray area that we talked about. It's not easy anymore. So these are all things that we use to inform our decision-making process. And if you think about some of the decisions we make at work, are we using all the data that's available to us? The answer a lot of times is no. In addition, this data is fantastic. More data we have, usually the better off we're going to be. But content without context is not nearly as meaningful. So what do I mean by that? Let's say we have a piece of content. I'm going to tell you the price of a car. The car is $20,000. Is that a good deal? We don't really know. We can't know. You don't know what kind of car it is. You don't know what year it is. You don't know what condition it's in. You need context. So what we're starting to see now is some of these data aggregation sites are providing context. Anyone familiar with Redfin? It's like Zillow. I think it's better. Personal opinion. Take a look at this. The Redfin estimate for this property is $657,000. That is $28,000 over the list price of $629,000. So it's listed for $630,000, but Redfin is saying it's worth almost $660,000. Is this house a good deal? Yes, it is, according to Redfin. Are we willing to substitute Redfin's judgment for our own about the real estate market? Probably. Someone's shaking her head no. But Redfin aggregates this incredible amount of data. It's all about my neighborhood, all the houses around me that have sold that are of comparable square footage and condition, blah, 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 blah. They come up with a number. Now, real estate agents, some of them like this because now you're an informed consumer. Some of them realize that Redfin, in an AI sort of way, is taking their job. Because do I really need a real estate agent? I can find all the houses. I know what they look like, as soon as they come on the market. I'm looking at my neighborhood. This house sold for $575,000. It was $14,000 below list. Hey, you know what? I also found 5 other houses that sold recently below list price. So if I'm looking in a neighborhood to buy a house, am I going to need to offer full price? No. So suddenly a decision is made a little bit easier. They even give you market insights right on the website. Here's what's been happening in the last year in Fairfax, Virginia, where I used to live. Their houses are selling for over list price. This is how long they're on the market. So whether you're selling or buying, this kind of information makes your decision a little bit easier. Remember, we're talking about decision sciences. We're talking about how to blend this information into making decisions. Same thing with car gurus. They're not just giving you the price. Look at the Audi up top. This is a good deal. It's in green letters and a big arrow, and it's making you happy and feel good about buying that car because it's $2,500 below the average sales price of that particular model in that particular area. So what these sites are starting to do is use algorithms and a little bit of machine learning to give you insight into the data that they're providing. And that insight is really where we all need to go. Let's talk a little bit about Netflix. Netflix, as it turns out, is brilliant. And I'll tell you why. They watched us watch them. Okay? We watch their shows. They track it. They track what we watch. They track how long we watch it. They track what we turn off. They track what genres it's in. They even let us set up different profiles so they can aim stuff at each person in our family. Then they took all that data from 2 or 3 years of watching, and they started doing predictive analytics. And they said, well, if people watch all these shows, what kind of shows are they going to want? And can we go to the networks and buy them? Or could we create them ourselves? So what do you think Netflix is doing right now except figuring out what you want and then creating it? It removes so much risk from the equation. What they used to do with the upfronts and the networks, they create the shows, they'd show them to a focus group, and then they try and figure out whether or not people were going to watch it. Netflix knows you're going to watch it. This is the number 2 show they've created so far with Aziz Ansari. The audience score is a 90%. This is the 61st show, 61st ranked show out of 70-something. Look at the audience score. It's still a 72%. That's like the worst they're doing. I looked through the whole damn list. I couldn't find one below 60. So even their worst shows, the ones that bomb, whereas before, it was a movie like Geely, now it's something like this. And Geely on Rotten Tomatoes has a 3. All right, this is a 72. So all of a sudden, they've taken the bottom out. And everything is, instead of, from 0 to 10, it's 7 to 10. 7's still pretty good. And they do it using predictive analytics, right? They're able to take the context, figure out what it is we're looking at, and then figure out what it is we want. So we start to think about having all this data. How can we do this at an association? How are we going to apply something like this? We have data. We have context. Smooth sailing, right? So close! I could almost throw a Newman in there, but Yeah, it's not quite that easy. And this is when we get to governance. Now, I'm not saying that associations have governance challenges. Far be it from me. Associations have governance challenges. So the tricky part here is that there are a number of things working against us, okay? There are things within the organization that are going to make applying this kind of data and thinking to our decision-making process and our planning challenging. There are also things within our brains that make this challenging. And I'm not talking about like one person's brain, I'm talking about the human brain in general. So we're going to talk a little bit about both of those. I like memes, what can I say? So I'm saying this isn't necessarily going to be easy. I'm also saying it is most definitely going to be worth it. I promised some people out in the hall a picture of a hippopotamus, and when I promise, I deliver. So here's a picture of a hippopotamus, and you might be wondering why I'm showing a picture of a hippopotamus. It's because of a phrase that you may be familiar with, which is the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion. This is an association thing. Now, I know none of you have experienced it. You've never been in a room where someone comes in and they're relatively uninformed, but they're also extremely senior, and they just start laying down the law about what's going to happen, even though all of your carefully laid plans are now being laid to waste. This is especially difficult in the situation we're talking about here. Let me give you an example. I worked at an organization that will remain nameless. We had a lot of people, okay, it was the American Wind Energy. We had a lot of people that were very supportive of what we did because renewables are great and it doesn't create any pollution and it just creates free energy. Fabulous. So we had a list of 275,000 people who subscribed to something. They were called Friends of Wind, okay? They didn't get anything. They didn't give anything. They just signed up and they were part of this group. And we said, gosh, if we could get 10% of these people to give us a couple bucks and give them something in return, we'll call it a low donor campaign, that would really drive some activity. We'd be able to take that, turn it into something special. So we sent a survey to the 275,000 people, and 16,000 responded, which is a very good response, and it's also statistically significant, meaning we can project that the overall group would reflect the opinions of those who responded. And those who responded said overwhelmingly, it was 80-something%, they wanted content. And we said, yes, we can deliver content because we have a ton of content. We're an association. We can retask it, we can slap it into a newsletter, zip it out, and they're going to be super happy. And they're going to give us like $5 a month. Fantastic. We get, 50,000 people giving us $5 a month. That adds up real quick. So we put the plan together, we had the survey data, we had a sample of the newsletter, everything was good to go. We sit down with the executive team. And the CEO says, oh, I don't know. I think they want a backpack. And me, in my ultimate wisdom at that age, said, well, actually, no, they don't want a backpack. They want a newsletter. They told us very specifically they want a newsletter. And they don't want a backpack. In addition, if we were going to try and make the backpack, we would have to design the backpack, find a vendor, have them build the backpack, ship the backpack to us, inventory the tens of thousands of backpacks, and then ship them out to these people, which is going to cost way more than $5. So no, they want a newsletter. She said, no, they want a backpack and a calendar. And that's when the very, very exciting low donor campaign died and was pushed to the side, and we never talked about it again. Why? Hippo. We even brought the data, and it wasn't enough. So I'm not giving you that example to discourage you. That was many, many years ago. I am giving that example because this is a very real problem. The question is, how do we get around it? We'll come back to that. This actually happened. Go ahead and read it. Raise your hand if this is vaguely familiar. Yes, it is. Oh, we got 2 hands. I love it. But there's only 20 people there, but they're 20 important people. we really have to know. We're losing money, the evaluations are terrible, less people. Why is this so hard? Because the hippos, sometimes the data isn't enough. And so somebody earlier, God bless them, mentioned that we have to change our mindset. That it's not a technology issue, this is a cultural issue. And it's a governance issue. How do we change our mindset to deal with this? So that when data comes in, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, when data comes in that challenges a deeply held belief, how can we actually get people to change their mind? So when we're talking about a program like this, or a segment of the annual conference that has underperformed year after year after year. We used to run a program when I was with health lawyers called the Masters Program. It was only for 30 people. We ran it every other year because we didn't want to run it every year because it lost money and because the evaluations were terrible. But we kept running it because we didn't have anything better to put in front of our long-term alumnus. So we ran the Masters Program and convinced ourselves that it was a good idea, even though the data told us otherwise. Oh, you guys saw Zootopia? I love this. I also love sloths. But if you haven't seen Zootopia, just Google Zootopia sloth and watch the DMV scene, and I guarantee you will fall over laughing. I put this slide up because sometimes associations don't move as quickly as we would like. Again, I'm sure none of your organizations suffer from this problem, but when we're talking about using data to drive decision making, a lot of times we have something called data decay. So take an example of someone that just joined your organization. What's the first thing we ask them to do while they're joining? Fill out the profile. Tell us about yourself. They fill out the thing. They tell us that they're interested in rainbows and lollipops. Great! 6 months from now, are they still interested in rainbows and lollipops? Probably. A year? 2 years? 5 years? We send them a little thing that says if you update your profile, we'll enter you in a drawing for a $100 Amazon gift card, which gets a 16% response rate. Suddenly the data, you guys are, did you just do that? Okay, I accidentally called someone out, and for that I apologize. The point being, for the 84% of people that haven't updated their profile, we're still sending them marketing for stuff about puppies and lollipops or rainbows and lollipops that they told us 5 years ago. So that's where the sloth comes in. We're not moving very quickly. We need more data, and we need it to be recent, and we need to act on it quickly while it's fresh. Because if we don't, it goes stale, it decays, and it's not of any value. But we use it and continue to use it because it's the best we've got. And that's simply not good enough. This is the crux of our problem. We're going to talk about this for a little while. You may or may not be aware of it. Our brains, in some cases, are working against us. So you've read this, and I'm going to play a little parlor trick on somebody. Can I get a volunteer? Trust me, it's harmless. Super easy. Yes, in the jacket. Nope, you're good. What color is this?
That is white.
Yes. What color is this?
White.
Excellent. Can you spell white?
Yes. W-H-I-T-E.
Fabulous. What do cows drink?
I was going to say milk.
Yes, you were. In fact, you're the first person that ever hasn't said that when I've done it in public. Raise your hand if you were thinking milk. Yes. There's a phenomenon in our brains. I did a degree in psychology. It's the only reason I know this. Called priming. You pull relevant information forward, and you're much more likely to access it when you're trying to answer a question. Now, that has absolutely nothing to do with the backfire effect. But what it is something that happens to all of us, happens to all of our brains, that we cannot necessarily control. Unfortunately, this is something else. Now, you may be passively familiar with the backfire effect. I'm not going to talk about politics, I promise. However, if you have recently engaged in a political conversation with someone who has differing views than you do, and you have used facts to try and change their mind about something, you may have noticed it is likely You were unsuccessful. Now, part of that, you may be frustrated because the person you're talking to is a moron. But you have to understand that we all do it. When facts are presented that challenge a deeply held belief, we are much more likely to cling more tightly to that belief. Let me give you an example. And the two gentlemen in the front might laugh or they might throw rocks at me. I'm not sure which. I once worked with a gentleman. He was a great guy, and he was, to his bones, a Microsoft guy. Okay? He loved Microsoft. Everything about Microsoft was the best it could possibly be. We had a phone system that ran on a program called Link, Microsoft Link. It was an unmitigated disaster. We couldn't make calls got dropped, you couldn't hear the other person couldn't hear you, sometimes it would cut it in out. It was just an absolute mess. And yet, the worse it got, the more ardently he defended it. And he would say, no, this is the best product on the market. No, it's something else. It was the implementation. It was something else. You're not using it properly. It can't possibly be a problem with Microsoft. So, his conviction, Microsoft creates the best products. The facts, it was a skunk. What does he do? Rather than saying, wow, this thing stinks, we better replace it, he goes deeper and deeper into believing that it is the best solution possible. So they did a couple studies on this. The couple that I read that people are probably familiar with are on yellow cake uranium. For those of you that remember that, when we were looking for WMDs in Iraq, they brought some people out and they found people that believed that they did find WMDs in Iraq and said, okay, here's the proof, here's the evidence, and no, they didn't find anything. And lo and behold, those people believed even more strongly that they did. Similarly, another topic that we're all familiar with, climate change. If somebody does not believe that humans are influencing the climate of this planet, and you show them overwhelming and unanimous evidence that we are, they believe more strongly that we are not. And so you can see how sometimes, I know, it's kind of weird, but it's true. It's very, very strange. Does anyone else, are you thinking of a conversation you've had with someone where you just couldn't understand why they weren't seeing your way? You couldn't understand why, even when presented with overwhelming, factual, objective evidence, they continually moved even further away than when you started the conversation. This is why.
That I don't believe it.
I don't think that's true at all. Yeah, well, that's the ironic part, is the backfire effect of the backfire effect. So why am I talking so much about this? The truth of the matter is, data within organizations is often used, or should often be used, to challenge deeply held assumptions and beliefs about your services, your programs, your membership, your mission, and everything that we do. I started writing a talk that was called Data, the Sword to Slay Your Sacred Cows. Okay, didn't finish writing it. Got into this instead, because that's one of the issues we face. If people truly believe, if the Hippo truly believes that this program is valuable, and we show a list of reasons why it isn't, it's declining attendance, we lose revenue, the evaluations are terrible, what are we actually doing? We're cementing that we need to keep running that program. So it's difficult because we want to use data to better our business and to make better business decisions to impact our revenues, but it's very hard to do so because of this. So, this is from Scientific American, if you want to go read the article. It's just more confirmation of this issue. So what's interesting about this is when people who don't believe in climate change were shown facts about climate change, rather than argue back with facts, they move to something else. So let's go back to our example with this hippo and this program that isn't working. And even just theoretically, when I was talking, what were some of the things that the hippo would say? We're running the program, it's losing money, the evaluations are terrible, but our most important members love it. Is that really verifiable? What does most important mean? Who are we talking about? The people that are there don't like it. Somebody likes it? You'll notice that when faced with objective facts, often people will start changing their position or changing their story, and then they'll move on to something that isn't disprovable, that has to do with emotion or invisible forces you can't see, or something that they can then stand on, because their island just dissolved. So now they're looking for a place to stand, and they create one. But it isn't created out of facts. Most often it's created out of something else, something less falsifiable, cannot be tested. So, two things to remember before we get into a little bit of, so what do we do about this exactly? A, often when using data, you are not looking for the right answer, you are looking for the best answer. This is not often about right and wrong. It may feel binary. It may feel that way because maybe the life of a program or a service or a person's job is on the line. And that feels really binary. Either we run the program or we don't. However, most of these decisions are in matters of degree. So it's not about making the right or wrong decision, which feels very weighty, and everyone has to get on one side or the other and oppose. It's about making the best decision. If we use language like that, it makes it a little bit easier to get everybody moving in the same direction because nobody has to be wrong. We can all be right together. We can find what's best for the organization. We can move it forward. So it's not about right and wrong. It's about improvement. Everyone's trying to get on the same bus. You can get everyone to agree that we want to improve the organization, improve its performance, its revenues, its, net promoter score, whatever it is you're trying to use the data to improve. Everybody generally gets behind that. You also have to remember that even as people are opposing what you're trying to do, it is very possible that their intent is good. And remember how hard it is to let go of these beliefs that we've driven so deeply. Remember that for ourselves too. Like Ben said, I don't believe it, right? Well, you've probably done this too. We all have. So as long as we're aware of it, I think it makes it a little bit easier to deal with. So what do? Work together to define success metrics beforehand. So let me talk a little bit more about this and why we do this. Let's go back to this program that we're going to eliminate. And let's say we're able to get together as a management team and say, we're not reviewing one program, we're reviewing our entire program's portfolio. Any program that is not making money at just registration with no expositions and no sponsorships is going to be further reviewed. If we're not able to find a way to get it to break even at registration, we're going to sunset it. Okay? We're not calling anybody's baby ugly. We're not pointing the finger at anything in particular. We're setting up standards and thresholds for our programs that are entirely reasonable. Once those have been put in place, when the data comes in and it isn't so favorable for this particular dog of a program, maybe we can do something about it. We already agreed what was going to happen when people weren't feeling threatened, when emotions weren't running high. It's easier to do as a group beforehand. Now, remind stakeholders what decision you're trying to make, right? We just talked about that. The data will support the best decision possible. Not the right decision, the best decision. Talk about the objectives. Talk about the facts of what we're trying to do. Are we trying to improve revenue? Are we trying to grow attendance? Are we trying to improve our renewal rate for membership? Are we trying to increase engagement? What exactly are we trying to accomplish? And what do we consider to be success? We're trying to increase use of our community platform so that more people are going to post or that more people are going to provide reviews. We're trying to increase attendance at this one program. trying to increase people providing comments on webinars. Whatever it is, as long as it's an objective metric, you can use it to then make decisions, better, more informed decisions. So when we're working to do the success metrics, what happens if? What happens if we find that this program really is well liked, but the revenues are terrible? What are we going to do? Are we going to try to grow it? Are we going to throw more marketing resources at it? What are we going to try to do? That way, it's not the data comes in and you try desperately to get people to make a decision together. Again, heat of the moment decisions, Steph's story aside, which was fantastic, are not generally the best decisions you're going to make. You want things to be cool, calm, and collected. Facts, just the facts. Certain outcomes trigger further review. So it isn't that, if the data looks like this, we cancel the program. It may be that for the entire portfolio, any program that falls below a certain threshold automatically undergoes an additional round of review. And what does that round of review look like? You can figure that out beforehand as well. Business outcomes, right? We're focusing on dollars, we're focusing on bodies, we're focusing on business. This is what's going to drive our business forward. This is what's going to make things stronger. So if we have these kinds of conversations beforehand, we're not getting into that point where suddenly data's coming in and everybody's yelling at everybody, because we know that's not going to end well. This is much more about getting things ready, tilling the field, planting the seeds, and then waiting to see what happens. And the truth of the matter is, if you think one thing's going to happen and something else entirely comes through with the data, that's okay. Because again, it's not like we're trying to use data to do something specifically. We're just trying to use it to make a better decision. And so once we're informed, whatever that decision may be is going to be better for the business. So this is from Scientific American. I stole it pretty directly. How to convince someone when facts fail. So this was a follow-up to their Flight from Facts article. Some of these I think are helpful and reflect what we've talked about. Some of them may not apply quite as much. I tried to weed them out. Keep emotions out of the exchange. We do that by doing it beforehand so that we're setting clear standards as opposed to making a decision based on one set of data. Discuss, don't attack. And we talked about that too. It's not about right and wrong. It's about what's best for the business. So as soon as someone feels like you're attacking, they're going to do what? Defend, because that's what we do. So it's not an attack. You got to keep everybody together, same kind of mission. Listen carefully. Try to articulate the other position. I'm sure nobody in this room, again, has had a misunderstanding where you're going like this with somebody. Make sure you understand their point. You might not agree with it, but if you clearly understand it, they'll at least appreciate that. They'll also appreciate the effort that you put in to understanding where they're coming from. And who knows, maybe once you understand the facts of their side, you'll see you were the one that was wrong. Has been known to happen. Show respect, same thing. Your tone, your body language. A lot of these conversations, when we're talking about sacred cows or things that people are very emotionally invested in, we're talking about having data to challenge those, it gets emotional. If you're showing respect and you're not needling people, you're much more likely for them to at least listen. They might not come along right away. Sometimes this takes multiple rounds of coming back and getting people used to an idea, but that's okay. It's not like, Rome wasn't built in a day. Sometimes these processes take some time. Acknowledge you understand why someone might hold an opposite opinion, okay? So yeah, these 10 members, they are super important. They're all past board members. They have a lot of influence. I understand why you think maybe we should hold a program at a loss. However, the data shows that none of them have any social media presence. They never talk to anybody else. And we really feel that if we were to cancel this program, the after effects would be minimal. And then you can always offer a compromise. What if we tried something in the middle? What if we cancel it and then we monitor very carefully, and if there is an uproar, we'll do this, right? Making the plan ahead of time. Setting out what's going to happen, the conditions, the thresholds that you're going to cross, and what action takes place. That way it's more automated. and there's less decision making in the heat of the moment. And then try to show that changing facts does not mean changing worldviews. You can still believe many things with some of the sub-elements changing a little bit, and that is okay. You don't necessarily have to flip to the other side to support something. It may be as much as, can we try this for 6 months, measure and evaluate, and see how it goes? And if the results look like this, we'll do this. And if the results look like that, then we'll either go back to what we were doing in the first place or we'll do something else. When you provide options like that, people feel like they're part of it. Or maybe they even design some of the options with you. And that's a great way of finding middle ground. So, to summarize, make sure you have lots of data, wrap it up in a nice package, and make sure that that data has context. Also understand that while data is a fantastic tool for helping make better business decisions, sometimes we will encounter resistance. That resistance is in many forms. This is just a couple of them. But hopefully, this gives you an understanding of how you might want to start framing some of these conversations within your organization and how you might use data a little differently within your planning and within your decision-making processes so that you can, in the end, make better business decisions. Any questions? Or people that just want to tell stories? Go, Ben.
I just want to keep everybody away from the bar for a couple more minutes.
Yes.
Guys, I always love listening to you. You just bring such clarity.
Thank you. I'll pay you later.
My question is about new initiatives and metrics that people want to try to attach to new initiatives. And so many associations are locked into an annual budget. And they say, well, if we're not seeing results in a year, we're going to cut this. But when it's a new initiative, there's no track record. So that's one of my frustrations with some of the projects that I've worked on is I have executives, I have hippos who are saying, all right, you've got 1 year to show. And I'm like, well, if you ask me today, as a new association, what our retention rate should be, like what's our metric for that? I'm just throwing spaghetti at the wall. So I'm just curious, for new initiatives, what kind of conversations have you seen effective to try to total line of, yes, we need data, but yes, we also need to try some stuff, especially in the state of disruption?
Sure. I think there's a couple sides to it. The first is that there's always data. It might not be from your organization, but if you've set up, X other things that look like that in the last 2 or 3 years, you may have some specific data to say, look, when we set this up, generally it takes between 12 to 16 months before it even gets to revenue neutral. So the first year we're going to have to eat it, or we're going to try and find a sponsor to cover it, and then we can expect it's going to start generating revenue. Again, have that conversation. If it hasn't broken even by 18 months, what are we going to do? So sometimes that will mollify the executive, knowing that there's kind of a fire break in place and that they're not going to have to go in and try and kill something, that it's already written in stone that there's going to be a review at this time. The other thing is sometimes there are industry norms that you might be able to lean on. They're not going to be as specific to what you're looking at. And the last piece is, and I'm a predictive type guy. If you've got a lot of data about your people, you should probably have an inkling as to whether or not they really want what you're going to do. And if it's believed that they do want that, they may be willing to make that investment a little bit more. So if you kind of package that all up, I think maybe those conversations will help. Or we can talk more later if you want. Other questions? Go.
I'm interested in your thoughts about the effect of change fatigue is having on boards, when there's so much change going on around them,
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes they look to the association as a place for calm, and so your thoughts on how that's impacting their decisions?
I suppose that's theoretically possible. I'd love to ask one of my friends from the behavioral sciences division, and that's kind of what they study, why people make the decisions they do. Change fatigue. I think there's a couple ways it could go. One is, you're right, they come to the board meeting and they don't read the stuff and they just want to sit there and be there, and it's kind of on their resume. And the other is that there's so much change around them that fatigue will cause them to not really care and they'll just kind of sign on to anything. So maybe we could say something like that would just be an amplifier to whatever their normal position would be. It's just going to be further one way or further the other way. I don't really know. That's a good question. Thank you. Others? Yes.
What do you do when the 10 most important people who are in that program are also your 10 most important revenue generators for the organization?
The 10 most important people in the program are also the 10 highest revenue generators for the organization. Trade association, sure. Well, I imagine that the revenue equation would look a little bit different for that. In that case, I would always say I've been in organizations where we specifically ran loss leaders, which is, a program that loses money, and you're doing it. And as long as it's being balanced out by significant impacts elsewhere that are measurable, that's okay. What I don't like doing is running loss leaders when we say, oh, well, this is just a membership benefit and it's improving retention. And you're like, prove it. Well, we can't. So I like to be able to prove everything. And as long as you can link, what I'd love to do is, put some machine learning behind it and link participation in that program to other behaviors and be able to say, okay, we rotate through the people that come to this program. And if you come to this program, you're 97% likely to renew with us. If you don't come to the program, you're 88% likely. So now suddenly you've got a 9% increase in retention, not necessarily caused by that program, but correlated with it. And now there's a specific reason to run that program. And you can say, we're willing to spend $200,000 to run the damn program because it has a specific impact elsewhere. But I'm a data guy, so, what can I say? Anyone else? In the back.
Can you give an example of a situation where you work with a client, look at their data, and help them do something different for their annual meeting following year?
We don't have time for that. Yes, absolutely. Where to start? We're working with an organization right now. They've got about 20,000 people that come to their conference. Those people indicate certain interests. It's a buyer-seller show. And we're helping them figure out, do those people actually go to the booths of those topics or not? So let's say it's lollipops and rainbows again. If I indicate I'm interested in lollipops and rainbows, are they actually getting to the lollipop and rainbow booths? And then there's a bunch of branches that come off of that. The first is we want to measure it for the first year, establish the baseline, and then possibly split the floor, do a neighborhooding situation where all the lollipop vendors are together on half, and on the other half it's just randomly spread to see if they find the lollipop vendors when they're together more often. Now, if you think about the way Amazon set up their warehouses, at first, they put all the like products together because that made sense. And then they started setting up warehouses, instead of putting all the dog food together, they put Purina dog food with this other kind of whatever because people tended to buy them together. And sure enough, those warehouses were significantly more efficient, which when you're on Amazon scale, big money, right? So what we're trying to do with this client is say, okay, if I put the lollipops together and the rainbows together, how often do people actually get there and how much do they engage? And on this side of the floor, we're just going to spread them out. Or we're going to put lollipops with gum because people that visit lollipops tend to visit gum and we think that they're correlated. So are they more likely to visit and engage more deeply there? Then we measure that, we figure out which way works better, we start to change the floor. At the same time, we give sponsors an opportunity to see, out of the 1,000 people that indicated they like lollipops, 500 have visited my booth. Can I send a communication to the other 500 and encourage them to come? In fact, can I split that, leave 250 out as my control group, and then send it to another 250 to see if they actually come more? Or can I split it again and give one of those groups an incentive? So now I've got nothing, just an email with an incentive, and see which one is most effective. So, like I said, it's data science, right? We're trying to set up these experiments and figure out what works best so that we can move ahead. Does that help at all? We can talk more later. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, based on your response, this is so weird. Are you worried about your lollipops not wanting to be next to their competitors?
Yes, absolutely.
Have you heard any feedback from them?
Not yet. Okay. Not yet. But the point is, once we know which way works better, if grouping them together works better, they're going to say, I don't want to be next to my competitors. And we'll say, people are 17% more likely to find you if you are. And they'll say, oh, okay. Or we'll put them next to the biscuits people, and we'll say, they're 17% more likely to engage with you coming from the biscuits booth. That's why you're here. So again, it's all about the objective data. It doesn't matter to us which way works better. What matters is that people are getting what they want.
Just to correlate on that, I worked in an association that dealt with that scenario, and because the members were the people that were traveling to the booths, it was their preference to have them all together because they wanted to, spend less time in between. So that made the decision with that data very easy.
Yeah, I mean, it tells the story for you, You've been a lovely audience. Thank you very much.